My girlfriend expected me to fund her lavish lifestyle, called me cheap for saying no. So I ended things and left her to figure it out on her own. I, 28M, was in a relationship with Emily, 26F, for about 3 years. For most of that time, I genuinely thought I'd found my person. Emily and I clicked on so many levels. We shared similar tastes in music, both enjoyed traveling, and had fun together. But the way we viewed money couldn't have been more different. And in the end, it was her entitlement that tore us apart. I grew up in a blue-collar family, and money was always tight. My parents taught me the importance of saving, budgeting, and not living beyond my means. I worked my way through college, got a stable job as a project manager, and felt proud of the financial stability I'd built. I wasn't rich, but I lived comfortably and saved for the future. Emily, on the other hand, grew up in a more privileged family. Her dad was a well-off businessman, and her mom stayed at home. Emily had never experienced financial struggles, and she'd had a comfortable lifestyle handed to her. When we started dating, I admired her confidence, her charm, and her independence. But over time, her version of independence started feeling more like entitlement, especially when it came to money. At first, it was little things, small comments that seemed harmless but set the tone for everything that followed. One day, she casually mentioned how her best friend's boyfriend had bought her a designer bag, saying, "Isn't that sweet?" He just wanted to show her how much he cared. She'd look at me with a hint of expectation, as if waiting for me to do something similar. But at that point, I just laughed it off, thinking it was nothing serious. A few months before her birthday, she sent me a link to an online wish list she'd created. I opened it, expecting to find some cute items, maybe a book she'd been wanting or something related to our favorite shows. Instead, I found a curated list of designer handbags, jewelry, a high-end spa package, and even a $2,000 luxury weekend resort stay. My jaw practically hit the floor. I texted her, laughing it off, saying, "These are some pretty pricey gifts for a birthday wish list." She replied, "What's the point of a wish list if you're not going to dream a little? It's my birthday after all. I deserve something special." I ignored the list, figuring she wasn't really serious. But as her birthday drew closer, she started hinting at some of the items on her list more and more. She'd say things like, "Did you see how gorgeous that insert expensive brand handbag is? I'd feel like a queen with that on my shoulder." Or, "Imagine the Instagram photos we could take if you surprised me with a luxury weekend." I eventually planned a getaway to a cozy cabin for her birthday, complete with dinners and a wine tour. I thought it was thoughtful and romantic, but when I told her about it, she looked disappointed. "This isn't one of those, rustic cabins, is it?" she asked, her face scrunching up in distaste. "It has a hot tub and a fireplace." "It's beautiful. You'll love it," I said, still hopeful she'd see the effort I put in. "Are you sure we can't just go somewhere nicer? Like the Bahamas?" she asked, only half joking. I didn't know what to say. I'd been working extra hours to make this weekend happen. And yet, all she saw was what it wasn't. That hurt. Not long after the birthday trip debacle, we went shopping together. While out, she realized she'd left her wallet at home and asked if she could borrow my card, just for a few things. I agreed, assuming she'd pay me back. She went off to browse, and I kept myself entertained until she was done. When she returned, she handed my card back, casually mentioning, "Oh, I grabbed a few essentials." I nodded, not thinking much of it, but later that day, when I checked my bank app, I was stunned. Not only had she bought the essentials, coffee and some snacks, but she'd also splurged on cosmetics, perfume, and even a new pair of shoes, all of which I hadn't agreed to cover. When I confronted her, she just laughed and said, "Oh, come on. I figured you wouldn't mind. It's not like I did it on purpose." She acted as if it was funny, as if using my card without permission was some cute quirk. But to me, it was a red flag, another moment where she showed how little respect she had for my hard-earned money. Emily worked as a freelance graphic designer. She was talented but wasn't always consistent with her income. She rented a nice apartment downtown and often struggled to keep up with her rent. One day, she brought up how hard it was to afford her place and said, "Since you're practically living here, don't you think it'd make sense if you helped out with rent?" This caught me off guard. I stayed over a couple of nights a week, sure, but I had my own apartment and all my own expenses. When I didn't jump at the idea, she pushed harder, saying, That's what serious couples do, you know. They support each other. When I told her I wasn't comfortable taking on her rent, she got irritated. She accused me of not being invested in our future and said I was holding back in the relationship. It was as if my financial boundaries were some sort of betrayal, and she didn't see why she should be responsible for her own lifestyle if I could cover it. Around this time, Emily also started booking pricey activities for us without asking. I'd find out last minute that she'd scheduled a luxury spa day, or made a reservation at an upscale restaurant, or even reserved a weekend getaway at a fancy hotel. I'd go along with it at first, assuming she was treating us, but at the end of each outing, she'd expect me to foot the bill. Her logic was that since I had a steady income, I should be able to cover these things no problem. When I pushed back, she acted offended, asking, "Don't you want to make memories together?" She'd twist it to make me feel guilty, framing it as a matter of our relationship rather than the blatant financial manipulation it was. If you'd buy me stuff, I wouldn't have to spend my money. Over time, Emily's shopping habits became more extreme. She'd go on weekly shopping sprees, buying expensive clothes and accessories, and then bring everything to my place to show off. She'd expect compliments and ohs and ahs every time, as if I should be amazed by her good taste. If I didn't react as enthusiastically as she expected, she'd sigh and say, "You know, if you'd just buy me these things, I wouldn't have to spend so much of my own money." I was dumbfounded. It was as if she genuinely believed it was my duty to fund her desires, simply because we were dating. And each time I reminded her that she was responsible for her own finances, she'd pout, sulk, or give me the silent treatment. Things took an even nastier turn when she began making these jokes about how she could easily find someone else who'd treat her right. She'd casually mention guys at her work or friends' boyfriends who had more money and were willing to spoil their girlfriends. Sometimes she'd say things like, "If I wanted to, I could upgrade to someone who'd make sure I'm taken care of." I tried to brush it off at first, but her jokes became more frequent. I could tell she was testing me, trying to get a reaction. When I finally asked why she'd even say something like that, she shrugged, laughing, and said, "Don't be so sensitive. I'm just reminding you of what I'm used to." Emily's family planned a big vacation, and she wanted to go but couldn't afford the plane ticket or the excursions they had planned. She casually suggested that I should help cover her costs, saying it was an investment in our relationship since it would let her spend quality time with her family. When I hesitated, she guilt-tripped me, saying, "Don't you want me to be happy? This is a once-in-a-lifetime trip with my family." She made it sound like a crime that I didn't instantly agree to fork over hundreds of dollars just so she could join her parents on a luxury vacation. Around this time, she began making passive-aggressive comments about my car. It was a practical, slightly older model that got me from point A to point B just fine. But to Emily, it was embarrassing. She'd drop hints about how much she'd love to be picked up in a luxury vehicle, and even sent me links to newer cars she thought would suit me better. When I told her I was saving up for other things, she rolled her eyes and said, "It's just a car. You work hard. You deserve to drive something better than that." She'd go on about how her friends' boyfriends all drove respectable cars, as if the car I drove somehow reflected on her status. It didn't matter that I was happy with my vehicle or that upgrading wasn't in my budget. She only cared about how things looked to others. The entitlement hit a breaking point one weekend when I had plans to go hiking with my friends. Emily called me the night before, insisting I cancel because she wanted to go to this luxury shopping district that was having a sale. When I explained that I already had plans, she got angry. "I just thought you'd want to spend time with me instead of running off with your friends again," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. Then she laid on the guilt even thicker. "I barely even ask for things. Why can't you just do this one thing for me?" I'd heard this line so many times by then. Every time I pushed back against her demands, she'd make it about my lack of commitment or paint herself as the long-suffering girlfriend who was always accommodating my needs. She even started saying that if I took her shopping, I could make up for not taking her on a real birthday trip or covering the luxury items on her wish list. When I finally caved and canceled my plans, I felt sick about it. I spent the entire day following her around expensive stores, watching her pick out clothes, bags, and shoes that were way out of my price range. At the end of the day, she handed me a few items and smiled, saying, "It'd be sweet if you got me these." Consider it a thank you for putting up with me. It was such a bizarre moment. Here was this woman who had manipulated me into dropping my own plans, spent hours dragging me around expensive stores, and now expected me to pay for items she picked out without any regard for my budget. The final straw came during a dinner out with her friends. It was a nice restaurant, the kind you'd go to for a celebration, but nothing over the top. I'd budgeted for it, though, knowing we'd be with a group, and wanted to treat her to a fun evening. At some point, one of her friends jokingly mentioned how Emily was the queen of getting what she wants. Emily laughed, and emboldened by the crowd added, "Oh, it's true. He knows he'd better keep up, or someone else might just sweep me off my feet." Her friends laughed, but I could tell she meant every word. Then, when the bill came, Emily didn't even glance at it before pushing it over to me with a sweet smile. "You don't mind covering this, right?" she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. I was livid. We hadn't discussed me covering everyone's tab, and the bill was massive. I kept my cool, but when we got outside, I told her that her behavior was embarrassing and unfair. Her face twisted, and she immediately started yelling at me in front of her friends, saying, "I can't believe you're making me look bad over a couple of dollars. You're so cheap." I'd reached my breaking point. I took a deep breath, told her this was the last time she'd ever put me in this situation, and walked away. Her friends looked stunned, and she just stood there, mouth open, like she couldn't believe I'd actually stood up to her. The next day, she tried calling, texting, and even showed up at my apartment to talk it out. She kept saying that she was just high maintenance, and I needed to understand that. "If you really loved me, you'd find a way to make it work," she insisted. But it wasn't about being high maintenance. This was about a deep-seated entitlement and manipulation that I simply couldn't overlook anymore. She wanted a lifestyle I couldn't and wouldn't provide, and any time I set boundaries, she pushed harder, guilt-tripping me and playing the victim. When I finally told her it was over, she broke down, accusing me of not being willing to fight for our relationship. But the truth was, I had been fighting, just not for the kind of relationship she wanted. I was fighting for respect, for boundaries, for mutual understanding. And I was done fighting alone. Breaking up with Emily was both painful and liberating. I felt like a weight had been lifted. I realized how much I'd been bending over backward to meet her unrealistic expectations. I'd lost touch with my own values, sacrificing my mental and financial well-being just to keep her happy. I'd spent so long putting her needs first that I'd forgotten my own. In the months since we split, I've found myself reflecting on what I want from a partner. I want someone who values me for who I am, not what I can provide. Someone who understands that love isn't a price tag, that shared experiences don't have to be filtered through luxury brands or expensive getaways. I've promised myself that in my next relationship, I won't allow myself to be manipulated or pressured into being someone I'm not. I learned a lot from being with Emily, even if most of it came from the tough lessons. I can't say I don't still feel a sting of regret, or that I don't miss some of the good times. But when I look back, I know I made the right choice. The life she wanted wasn't just high maintenance. It was unsustainable and honestly exhausting.